Hi, everyone. My name is Breya. Right now, my capitalist job, I'm the Deputy Director of Organizing at Girls for Gender Equity. So I spend a lot of my time working with Black girl survivors and youth. I'm a former member of the Black Youth Project 100, and I've been organizing since I was like 15, not by choice, but by circumstance. And so to really understand all of my work around care, you kind of have to understand the intersections that I work in, because they all matter to what I am talking about. So a couple of years ago, I was approached by Black Women Radicals. They're one of my favorite digital platforms, and they launched the School of Black Feminist Politics, and I first kind of gave this talk on care ethics. And they found me because I was on Twitter talking about love all the time. And so they were like, you need to give a talk. I started a blog called Black Reading to Heal, and basically what my blog on Instagram does is it uses the writings of Black women primarily as a healing modality, but then it's also tracing like the canon of strategies that Black women have provided over the years that teach us something, which is a memory practice, right? So what did, not just Audre Lorde, but like what did Anna Julia Cooper say about care? Right, like it's trying to take us all the way back there to apply the now. And one of my favorite things that Bell Hooks talks about is she says that like we have to figure out what strategies helped us survive back then that are no longer applicable today, and we have to figure out which strategies helped us survive back then that we actually still need to remember and like reenact now. So it's this constant practice of going back and forward and also being in the present. So that's kind of like how we begin. Of course, All About Love is everyone's favorite Bell Hooks book. I think it's one of the most popular ones. However, my favorite by her is actually this one, Sisters of the Yam. She really did her thing. I think that I found this book when I was so young, and it rocked me to my core because I started to realize that everything that I was saying about love and care when I was really, really young in my teen years was like riddled with marketplace logic. It was riddled with like what the state told me. It was riddled with like what popular culture told me. And Bell Hooks just came in and like punched me in my face and was like, no, there's another way. So, and then here are some other just Black writers who I find myself grounded in. I always try to start with this because you may not know who these people are. I don't like to make assumptions. We have Ella Baker, we have Audre Lorde, we have Nina Simone and James Baldwin, we have Toni Cade Bambara, we have my favorite girl in the whole world, June Jordan. Just so many wonderful writers. I'm also grounded in scholars like Jamita Barlow, Dr. Jennifer Nash, Joy James, my sister Belfina Laurent, and Dr. Lamar Bruce. So my definition of love, what I always try to start people off with, is June Jordan's poem, Resolution 1003, where she says, I will love who loves me. I will love as much as I am loved. I will hate who hates me. I will feel nothing for everyone oblivious to me. I will stay indifferent to indifference. I will love hostile to hostility. I will make myself a passionate and eager lover in response to passionate and eager love. I will be nobody's fool. I like to ground us in this poem because I think that it really captures what care and love has to be for Black people, especially. I'm never talking about agape when I talk about love. I'm never trying to get people to love people who are violent or harmful to them. I'm never talking about a passive kind of docile type of love that can just be bought and sold, right? I do believe in violence to an extent because I believe in Black liberation. I believe in Black self-determination, right? And I understand that for me, care is risk assessment, care is war, care is love, care is resistance, care is a return, care is a memory, and care is also death work for Black women. And we have to hold all of those multiple truths. And a lot of what I'm talking about with care cannot be divorced from the definition of anti-Blackness. Many people get upset when I say this, but it's a very Afro-pessimistic thing where we like to say that anti-Blackness is the organizing principle of the world, and it is a part of everything that at least this country is. And so when we're talking about care, again, moving away from a very romanticized version of it and really reckoning with the positionality of Black women and Black gender marginalized people, and also understanding that like care is war, right? Like care is not to be romanticized. And then also in my work, what I found, because I was focused so much on Black people, is that there's no way to talk about care without talking about the care economy. So another intervention that I was really adamant on making is like not letting care just be this cute romantic thing that we talk about, we love each other, you know, it's filled with just a bunch of pleasantries. No, we're actually talking about an entire economy that Black women occupy, that they have occupied since enslavement, right? So what does it mean to talk about care for women whose bodies were used for reproduction and enslavement and all of those things, right? We're always talking about labor when we talk about care in any way as it relates to Black women. Okay, so enough of that. Now I'm gonna read my paper a bit. So I said, growing up as the eldest daughter, the question of care has always been important to me. Many girls and people socialized as girls are inundated daily with messages about serving others as early as they can remember. More specifically, they are socialized into ignoring their desires, needs, and wants for the family's sake, upward mobility, love, and more. It is critical to note that modes of violence also maintain this foregoing of the self. When I use the word love, I do not mean agape or any Christian-based idea pushing us to love our enemies. I mean a love and care ethic that is rooted in Black feminist principles. It acknowledges that the world is awful, and it wants you to hate yourself and your Blackness, and still instead you practice the refusal of patriarchy, capitalism, and white supremacy. I ground my work in June Jordan's poem because it speaks to a care ethic and a love practice that does not force people into denial about their experiences of the world. I am not pushing people to meet acts of violence with love, but instead you can become passionate and an eager lover. Do you have the skills to do so? Are you grounded in discernment and able to move beyond your pain enough to give and receive love when hostility, indifference, and hate are absent? And on the opposite end, can you retract your care and love when hostility, indifference, and contempt are present? We must define care, love, and intimacy for ourselves outside of capitalist logic and abandon the grammar of patriarchy. I believe love requires care, but I do not believe that care requires love. You can care for someone or be caring, but that does not mean that you are loving. Similarly to bell hooks, I view care and care ethics as something we do and show as a praxis. I am not invested in making people love each other. My care ethic says I do not need to love you, and I don't exactly need to know you, but I understand that our interdependence is fundamental, and I am clear about what the stakes are against capitalism and patriarchy. What I'm essentially saying is that care is a war strategy. Care work, and the care economy and care ethics have long been theorized and researched. Care in general has been subjected to much feminist debate and critique on the individual, collective, and global scale. An ethic of care is embedded in Black feminist praxis and modes of relation. Black writers such as Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, Maya Angelou, and Lorianne Hansberry speak about love and care ethics in their novels, books, and poems. The groundbreaking Combahee River collective statement named their politics as evolving from a healthy place of the love of themselves, their sisters, their communities, and which allows them to continue the struggle and the work. We arrive at the necessity for developing an understanding of class relationships that considers the specific class position of Black women who are generally marginal in the labor force. Their statements highlight a theme of movement between the personal and the political, where the personal is political, yes, and it also moves from the self to the community and to an understanding of class relationships, to an understanding of relationships to systems of power. This movement can happen one by one, it can happen simultaneously, it can happen forward, or it can happen backwards. The point is that one's capacity to care deepens and expands because it has to. And if you get stuck in the first level, you've been stuck with capitalist logic. Over the last few years, I've been tracking themes of love and care in Black women's writings, how they receive, give, and retract it. In her groundbreaking essay, Love Politics, Black Feminism, Post-Intersectionality, Jennifer Nash noted that Black feminism's pleas for love as a significant call for ordering the self, transcending the self, a strategy for remaking the self and moving beyond the limitations of selfhood. We move beyond the limitations of selfhood and individualism when we evolve into a radical politic and collective approaches. But when Black feminism is simply an identity marker for someone or a lifestyle, they stay in the reordering the self stage. Very few people ever move beyond the limits of selfhood. I would argue that the majority of people never make it to the reordering stage at all. Self-care has been co-opted into capitalist indulgence, liberalism, and most specifically and most importantly, self-care has been co-opted into offsetting suffering onto more vulnerable people. And it is imperative as Black women that we acknowledge when we participate in that. When Audre Lorde was grappling with the idea of self-care, she was also in her second battle with breast cancer. I find it really, I'm going to break away from this for a second. It really bothers me how people have extracted self-care from Audre Lorde and they know nothing about her struggles in the academy and they know nothing about her struggles with cancer, right? It also bothers me that most people don't realize that their favorite prominent Black women writers have all died from cancer and were writing through that sickness. You cannot divorce their writings from that, right? And so Audre Lorde says in A Burst of Light, I had to examine in my dreams as well as in my immune function tests the devastating effects of overextension. Overextending myself is not stretching myself. I had to accept how difficult it is to monitor the difference. Necessary for me as cutting down on sugar. Crucial physically, caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political welfare. So if you think that is the text that births self-care, then you understand how egregious it is when now self-care is discussed as a face mask or a trip at a luxury spa, right? It wasn't supposed to do that. 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. And so contending with the structures of power that force, I am talking so fast. How many minutes do I have? Because
You're at about 12 minutes ago.
Okay. Wow, I cannot go this fast. Okay. Contending with the structures of power that force Black women into physical, emotional, and psychological overextension, Audre Lorde was writing at the intersection of disability, labor, interpersonal reflection, and systemic critique. But popular culture and liberal feminists have completely divorced much of this work from its context and left the political welfare out of the framework by design. Social media platforms and pop culture have oriented people around luxury-based approaches to self-care. Self-care has become outsourcing domestic labor and overall consumerism. The capitalist marketplace of love and care are expansive, with new routines, books, products, and content entering our lives daily. There is a lack of consideration for our relationships with service providers, workers, and vulnerable communities. Only coded language for neoliberal extraction and exploitation guised as self-help and care. It's not to say that Black women and gender-expensive people are not making genuine personal and material shifts towards caring for themselves and others, but it is to say that we have not figured out care strategies that just simply don't offset burden on someone else. We are in a deep class struggle with care that we as Black feminists must contend to. My most potent example of this is a few years ago when a midwife tweeted that you're not supposed to treat nice nurses like they're your maids. She started to speak about the overextension and exhaustion that midwives were going through, and that night doulas were going through as well. And she was dogpiled by other Black women who said, so we don't get to rest, so we don't get to sleep, so we don't get help. And it was in that tense debate between Black caregivers and Black mothers that I realized that we really haven't figured out class amongst each other, right? And so what does it mean when we have positioned doulas as these people who are supposed to save us from maternal mortality, and we also do not care about their experiences, right? That's what I mean about this deep tension within us as Black women. The life-sustaining, where was I at? See, this way you don't break. Yes, okay. So care work and a care ethic tend to place the burden of the doing onto the same vulnerable groups of people. Joy James argues that the captive maternal is the one who is tied to the state's violence through a non-transferable agency that they have to care for another. A captive maternal is not an identity, but a relationship to state and a function. A caretaking, self-sacrificing, and labor of Black women particularly is used to restabilize the state. To break that down, basically what she's saying is that the state relies on us to care for each other so that it does not have to act. So there are ways in which we are preserving each other that still upholds the state. That's what Joy James is talking about. So my question is, how do we figure out when to retract that? And who has to suffer in order for us to retract that? These are really important questions to contend with as the world continues to fall apart. This life-sustaining practice that everyone relies on for their survival is also death work. When I say care work is death work, I really do mean that. I often think about the amount of famous Black women writers who died of breast cancer. Toni, Kay Bambara, Audre Lorde, Lucille Clifton, Pat Parker, Barbara Christian, B.B. Moore Campbell, and countless others. So many of these women speak to the same type of overextension that Audre Lorde had to face in her final days. These overextensions are why I say that every Black death is also a premature death. Daily, we are robbed of our health, wellness, agency, and sovereignty. We also have to contend with the term non-care that Jennifer Nash provided in Birthing Black Mothers. Non-care is supposed to refer to violence from obstetric violence. Is that how you say that word? Yeah. Violence Black women and birthing people experience. Non-care can also be applied to medical experiences more broadly. In the United States, Black women are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than any other racial group of women. And the maternal mortality rates of gender marginalized people are completely ignored. Another critical point Jennifer Nash makes is that white people predetermine the quality or type of care that Black people receive. Gotta go back to that. So white people predetermine the quality and type of care that Black people receive. While central to a critique of the medical industrial complex, one can also argue that forms of non-care permeate the lives of Black women, girls, and gender-expansive people broadly. How do we navigate a world and systems pricing us out of essential resources and promising ecological disaster, militarized police violence, chronic illness, and patriarchal violence? How do we resist becoming or being these omnipotent caregivers while also understanding that care is still a generative power necessary for our survival? I struggle to answer these questions across all areas mentioned above, but what I believe is that no one can opt out of care entirely. We must always understand our relationship to care, because a relationship to care is a relationship to power, and that power is constantly shifting. Reordering the self gives us new grammar and language to govern our internal scripts and capture our evolving politics. We have to abandon marketplace language like luxury apartments and luxury Black girl and maintain a discourse that is collectivist and, most importantly, has a materialist approach. Rather than assign receiving care or practicing self-care as some type of award that you get because you are a phenomenal Black woman, we have to understand that everyone is deserving and must have access to care and resources. We have to maintain that every single person is deserving of this because capitalism has to fall, as opposed to I have earned this because I have worked hard. On the other hand, we must practice refusal and refuse the role of the omnipotent caregiver. But most importantly, we have to know that when care is used as a stand-in for violence, and that care itself can be a form of violence, Black people have and can have their agency and lives taken from them in the name of being cared for. And if we understand that, then we understand that when it comes to the canon and terrain of care, the stakes are vital. What were we gonna say? On the individual and interpersonal level, I want Black women and gender-expansive people to undertake reordering themselves. I want them to sit and define and redefine love and care and ground themselves in ideologies and frameworks that they need to live out their lives. When definition and praxis will bring you closer to the community and allow you to move without feeling that everyone's survival is on your shoulders. How do you handle the stress and weight of having no one else to care for you? We must resist people who make us invulnerable heroes, servants, political savers, and deepen our relationships with those who can actually hold us. The capacity to care and love is a skill that we must build and learn daily. Capitalism wants us to believe that it's just innate, but it is actually a skill and a capacity that has to grow. If you wake up one day and you have no idea who you are outside of caring for everyone else, know you can always meet yourself again. And if you feel the sentiment, if I don't do it, no one else will, then it's time to assess the situation and figure out where retracting your care is possible, or you will die. The stakes are that high, and that is how we have to understand the care struggle. Nothing about this essay should be romanticized. Much of this work can create hostility, isolation, and even violence in your life. And still, refusing the omnipotent caregiver status is a personal and political necessity. Thanks.